Hi everyone, welcome to Class 8 of Map Painting and Digital Environments. Today we're basically going to continue on with the project shot. Now, what we'll be doing, I'll first kind of go through all the reference and kind of mood shots I've found in relation to this shot. I've continued modelling a little bit, but I wanted to show you a little bit more of, I guess, some of the motor functionality as far as profile modelling and stuff. I won't kind of spend the lesson modelling because there's no point. But I've also purchased some models to populate the scene with, which I'll show you. I can't distribute them because the licenses don't allow that. But basically, anything in the foreground for the shot, I'll be modelling, so I can share it with you guys. So yeah, now first up, I've collected some more reference. I just want to go through all that and kind of talk about a little bit more about the architectural style I was thinking, and and I guess in the kind of the mood and the lighting. So, I mean, these are some earlier references of the kind of Victorian terraces. I mean, these are a bit more grand, I guess, than the model we're making. But I did find this great website, and I'll post the link to it. It's basically essentialarchitecture.com, I believe is the file. Sorry, the web address, but it has this kind of great just reference of the different styles of architecture. Now, there is Victorian here, or is it? As you can see, a lot of them reference Australian architecture, and obviously I'm influenced by that. But then it goes on to talk about, kind of industrial Victorian, and then here we go. Here's the kind of the index. But you can see that, I mean, and this is especially the case in Sydney, that there's a mixture of styles in the early kind of 1900s. Like 1800, early 1900s, there's definitely a mixture of Victorian and then I guess more classical, and then there's like the Flemish Dutch style, which is up here somewhere. So, I mean, yeah, like I guess a lot of cities are like that. They're all just a mixture of the different early European kind of classical architecture. So yeah, I mean, our model to some degree is like that. Any kind of standard mix. So what I've managed to find some great moto models on Turbo Squid that were done in the kind of this Flemish Dutch style, of kind of like Bruges, that place in Europe. It's a great film set there. So anyway, I've purchased a few of those as kind of background. There's a few Victorian buildings, but they're so similar to kind of what I'm modelling that there was no point buying them. So yeah, well, so I'll post a link for this reference because it really is good. I mean, it's really handy to have, obviously, a big library of stuff like this because, you might come across a job, they'll ask you to, do the concept or whatever, but the more the access, the better access you have to any reference, you're going to be in a much better standing at the start. And the other thing, I guess the other kind of reference hunting I was looking at was kind of creating like a mood board, I guess, for the lighting. So I've basically, I think I already kind of said that, I was interested in this shot being, quite late in the afternoon, a bit past magic hour maybe, or, twilight. But since then I've been working on this job where, it was kind of done in the moonlight, and so, or accentuated moonlight, so, and it just looks lovely. So I've kind of been researching a bit of moonlight reference, and I mean it seems to be it was very popular with like impressionist painters and classical artists. It obviously has this kind of distinct feel to it that it just looks beautiful. There's this shot in particular. I've got a high res one. Where is it? This shot's beautiful. So I mean, you can see this was kind of it's like a bit twilight. The moon's out, or maybe that's the sun going down. But either way, there's a few directional shadows, but not really many. And then there's just there's the occasional light on. Everything's quite dark. It just has this kind of beautiful feel. So that's this kind of along the lines I was thinking. Probably a bit darker than this. I'll try and find a better reference in here. Even stuff like this is great. It's just like the blue tones in the ambient. So we'll have these kind of blue shadows and no real whites apart from where any lights are. That's really nice too. Just has a great feeling, and obviously they're not always blue too. Like this kind of works with green really well. And that's great. This is kind of perfect for how I see, I guess, how the textures will be lit around our lighting. We're talking about doing stuff in moonlight. Now, we don't need to necessarily go and shoot textures in moonlight, but we are going to have to adjust them to fit the kind of, like I said, the kind of blue ambient light, and to some degree the shadows should be fairly heavy, even though they'll be soft. In stone and bricks, etc. We will have shadows coming from our street lamps, and the flickering paths I was talking about. We will have to do kind of a separate lighting pass on our mats. But generally, the way I see moonlight kind of lighting, it's obviously fairly dark. The softish shadows. Any hard shadows we're going to have to kind of put in, but so anything you shoot on an overcast day, even stop down a little on your camera will work. And then we can just kind of adjust it to fit blue, because obviously you can go and shoot in moonlight, but where you might have a lot of more unusable textures, so you're better erring on the safe side and shooting kind of overcast to late afternoon. And you'll find that you've got kind of more usable textures, I guess. So knowing all that, going back to the model, as I said, if I go to camera view, I've been roughly kind of lining it up as I've been modelling it. It's pretty close. It's not perfect, but it never will be. The stairs at the front are a bit of a funny one. I can't quite get the camera. The stairs need to be kind of lower than ground level to fit the drawing, so that's all right. We're just a bit higher. Generally these two line up pretty well. So I mean that's kind of where that's at. Now, obviously there's still a lot more modelling I need to do, and as I mentioned, I'll basically model what's in the concept I'll model here. And then I'll use, and I'll show you some of the models I've bought. I'll kind of mid-ground, I'll use some purchased models. And then background will be, probably a combination of static cards, maybe some models. It depends on what we need. And we'll know that once we have the foreground and mid-ground done. So, luckily, I did search for it, but these models were made in Modo, so they're very, it's very helpful, obviously, to get model. I mean, and they're beautiful models. It's a shame that you can't just use them. They're not quite the right style in architecture. They're the Dutch kind of Flemish style. But they have all these kind of things like the sign that I was going to have on the side of the pub, and they have this kind of early, maybe 18th century feel. I mean, they're obviously older, or they look older. I think it's more 16th century. But they'll suit because cities do have varying kind of styles. I mean, probably less so in these kind of classic countries in Europe where it was all very much made at the same time. But in cities like Sydney and Melbourne, etc., that cities just were kind of built up, and you'll find Victorian terraces next to Federation bungalows or something. And anyway, so this is, it's going to be great as kind of a mid-ground. We like that big, and then we've got kind of a tower. Another building. But as I was saying about getting Moto models, I mean, Moto is a bit picky about its models. It doesn't like kind of messy, doesn't like tries really, doesn't like anything that's not kind of modelled cleanly. And so, it can be very difficult to bring in stuff that's modelled in Max into Moto. And you'll find, obviously, a lot of Turbo Squid is modelled in Max, so it can be a little fiddly trying to get this stuff to work, I guess, as, secondary models. But they'll work for the purpose that we want it. Basically, it's just populating the scene. And, as much as the luxury of being able to sit here and model these would be fun, you just don't have the time. So, there's nothing wrong with buying models to help fill out your scene, and then you've got your hero buildings in the foreground, and then background stuff we'll just have to deal with as we get to it. So, so you can see the difference in detail. I mean, I've still got a lot to do here. Now, just going through, I mean, what I wanted to kind of show you guys was some of the little kind of neat tricks in Moto for detailed modelling. So I'll turn off the other stuff at the moment. We don't need it. Let's concentrate on this. Okay, so say you wanted to add some kind of bevel details to the top of these columns for starters. Hit the bevel tool, and normally, we've got a profile already